Okay, how about now? Let me know in the comments. Oh, great. Yeah. I love talking to myself, not even realizing that you guys can't hear me. But okay, now we're good. Let me make sure I mute myself on Twitch. Okay. Now I think we're good. Okay. Officially, hi everyone. I'm Tim Von Rieden with CG Cookie, and I run the the concept division. And we do these weekly live streams at 2 p.m. Central Time, and usually they're on a specific topic that is hopefully educational as well as having fun. I don't know why I can hear myself. Hold on. I don't want to hear myself on these streams. Oh, I know why. I have Twitch open on another tab. There we go. Okay. So today we're going to be talking about how lighting affects color. And I missed the introduction earlier, but I'll do it again. So everyone, meet Frederick. He is going to be our guest for today's stream. And the reason I think he is a good example object, and I think you guys should find something like this to do your own demos on, is because his body is more matte, it absorbs lighting, but then his bill is reflective and it reflects light. So the reason that that is great is because you can put him in different scenarios that are like in the sunlight or in shadows or with bounce lighting, and you can see how different the material treats lighting and how that will affect the overall color. So Frederick is going to be our example for the first half, and then the second half, I'm going to be drawing another one of our Pokemons for the Poke Contest that is going on right now, and it'll go through till the end of August. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, we do seasonal contests at CG Cookie, and we have more information below if you're interested. And I've seen some pretty good ones entered so far, but we still have half a month for more entries to come in. And if you have any questions at any point, please put at CG Cookie Concept before your question. That way, while I'm working, I can look up and see the question really quick, and then I can go back down and continue working. Okay, let's see here. I think I'm good to start. Frederick's home is in the hot tub outside. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started now. So while I'm working on this, and if, oh, you know what? I forgot to put the specs of what I'm working on. I'm sorry. I was told you guys I was going to do that last week. Below, I'm going to put, oops. What specs that I am working on, but essentially I'm working on a Mac Pro and I'm using a Cintiq 22-inch touch. And I will be working in Photoshop today. But nothing I do will be Photoshop specific unless if I use the Liquify tool, which I may or may not use. But everything else is basic blending and creating value. So if you're working with like Paint Tool SAI, you're just as good as if you're working in Photoshop or GIMP or any of those other ones. Okay. So I'm going to hide that. And then while I'm doing the demo, I'm also going to be putting a little box in the corner. Oops. I'm going to zoom in. My handwriting's a lot better when I can actually get more of my handwriting in, when I can see it. As you can see, we're going to be working on 17 by 13, but I want a 300 resolution instead of a 72. Okay. So now I'm going to put in the corner the tallies for which Pokemon we're going to be drawing today. And last week we actually did Magikarp. And I was super surprised that that was the one you guys picked. But in second place, I believe was Jigglypuff or Snorlax. So I wouldn't be surprised if those make their way back into the tally today. So if you want to put which one you want to see, I'm going to write down the name and that will count as one. And then for every one after that, it'll have a line next to it. And whichever one has the most at, let's say, 3:15-ish, if that's how long the initial demos take, that's when we will go ahead and get started. Or maybe 3. I feel like we could probably get through the duck, through Frederick pretty quickly. No offense, Frederick. And then we will go ahead. I'll find a quick reference or two of what Pokemon I'm drawing, and then we'll go ahead and do it. But remember, if you're voting, please put at CG Cookie Concept in the comments before so I can see it pretty quickly. So like right now, I'm going to take a few. Seems like you guys are just as eager to see that. So we got, let's see, Dratini. Oh, that would be an interesting one. Ekans. Gengar. Oh, that was another popular one from last week. Oh boy, yeah, you guys are excited here for some Pokemon. Gengar 2, Latios. Oh, Psyduck. Actually, Psyduck would be kind of perfectly fitting for today. If I had my own vote. Well, I guess I can vote, right? Yeah, I think I can vote. I'm going to vote Psyduck. Okay, Coughing. I actually think Coughing is really cute. I don't know why he gets a bad rap. Haunter. Oh my gosh. You guys have way more suggestions than we did last week. Hold on. I'm going to actually make this bigger. I'm running out of room, and I need to actually have room for later. And I'm going to do the ones that I'm most familiar with so that when I'm drawing them out, I can know the reference. And I kind of have an idea of what they already look like. So some of the new ones, if I don't recognize their name, I probably won't want to do that one, just so you guys know. Snorlax, who is actually my favorite Pokemon, most likely. Gengar. Ninetales might be a little too much for a half hour. No, I mean, I guess. No, I think I would want to do something more spherical, probably. Another Gengar. Psyduck. Haunter. Inaloan Sandslash. That's that new one. I'm surprised they're making ice. I feel like maybe I'm the only one that's surprised by all of that. I think they're cute, but like, why not make them a different Pokemon? Kind of like how Vaporeon and Jolteon are the same evolution of Eevee, but they're different Pokemon. So I don't see why the Vulpix, the Ice one and the Fire one, could just be different. But I don't know. I could be the unpopular opinion here. Oh, and please only vote once. I can't double check to make sure you guys aren't cheating and voting more than once, but it'd make me feel really good knowing you guys aren't cheating the system. Agumon. I'm going to write that for kicks and giggles. Because actually, Digimon was a show I watched growing up. I mean, I watched Pokemon and I played every Pokemon game, but Digimon holds a special place in my heart. Okay, I'm going to... Wait, Psyduck. Let me get the last few ones in. So after I do this initial tally, I'll do the demo, and then we'll do one more tally again before we actually do the winner. Oh, I feel like I put a little, what is that, influence on the vote. I shouldn't have put which one I wanted to do. But I mean, Psyduck does kind of make the most sense, but who knows? Maybe another one will win. Tentacruel. I would like to do Tentacruel, but I feel like that's a bit too much for this stream. Another one for Agumon, Jigglypuff, and Psyduck. Okay. Or Aloha Raichu. or a little and Squirtle. Okay. Okay. We're going to stop the tally for a little bit so we can actually get some drawing in here. But just know I'm going to put that on the side so you guys can still see it. And then when I ask for the next tally, or if you feel like you really want to put your vote in, I'll still be looking up to see what you guys want to see for today. Okay. Let me make sure we're good. Okay. So when it comes to color and light, I really do believe these are so crucial for any artist. And especially with digital art, we have such a freedom to experiment because you can't really mess up with digital art. You can always redo or recolor whatever it is that you need to fix. You can do very easily in digital. With traditional, it does become a little harder, especially if you're using like oil paints or even acrylics or inks or paints. Anything that once you put it down, it's kind of permanent. It's there. I guess oils you can kind of mess with, but it's very troublesome. Where with digital, you have so much freedom that I really want you to experiment with color and light, because the best way to get good with color and light is to practice. And I know that sounds so stereotypical, but it's true. All of the best color artists that I've talked to, they always say, like when I ask, how do you get so good with color? And they're always just saying, I experimented and then one day it kind of clicked. And the color palettes that I was using were starting to be in harmony with one another. And that's very true. I feel like I started getting better with color once I allowed myself not to be so rigid and just throw in random colors. Just while you're working in your shadow, throw in purple and blue in the shadow and just see what happens. There's nothing wrong with experimenting, or if it turns out bad, whatever, it was an experiment. And that's why I really encourage you guys to do what I call throwaway pieces. And that's where you fully go in with the intention that you're going to experiment. It's not meant to be a portfolio piece. It's not meant to be a concept for your own personal project. It literally is meant just for you to allow yourself the liberty to experiment with color or light or whatever it is that you want to experiment with. So I'm going to do just a quick little demo of a sphere, and then we'll go ahead and do a demo with Frederick. And the first thing that I'm going to put when it comes to working with color, try your best to avoid using black and white. This is something that I've heard multiple artists tell me, and I've watched a lot of tutorials, especially recently from the Tonko House creators, Dice and Robert, and they have a lot of videos. You should go check them out. If you don't know who they are, they created this animation short called Dam Keeper, and I'm basically obsessed with who they are and what they create and their vision and their passion. And I watch a lot of their color and light tutorials. I even took their Schoolism course a year ago, and one of the main things that they talk about is do not use, or do your best to avoid using pure black and pure white. And it's so helpful. It was one of the things that made me start to see my shadows in a different way, where before it would be like adding black to create more shadow, where now I'm adding like blue, or especially if they're outside, the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. And I think that's why you gotta just experiment with it. So as my first example, if we're working with, let's pull up Frederick for a second. I'm gonna make a new layer. Oh, and if you missed last week's, this was the Magikarp that we created from last week. And even with this, you can see all of like my subtle use of purple and blue on his body, or even on this top fin. Look at the purple that was incorporated there. If you think it will add more interest to the overall piece and it's more fantastical, add it in. If it really will help the composition, you can go too far where sometimes the form and shape start to lose the value that you placed, but don't feel like you have to restrict yourself only to realism, because I think that's where a lot of artists struggle. All right, let me really quick. Oh, could I write the name? Yes, I can. Thank you for asking, Arcazeros. So the animation studio that they created is called Tonko House. And they actually did an art book right here that was for their original short, The Dam Keeper. I don't know how well you can see this, but you see this little pig. If you guys don't know, I'm a huge lover of that animal. I think pigs are majestic creatures and they should be treated as such. But essentially what was great about this book, not only did it go over their entire process, but they did step-by-steps on showing like how they actually did the animation. And my favorite thing that I learned, because I read this book yesterday and I digested it. I ate it up and I digested it for this yesterday because we're actually creating a new video game at CG Cookie and I was appointed art director and I feel like I'd never worked in the industry, so I have to teach myself a lot. And I know that I'm going to stumble and that's okay because I think one of the better things about being a concept artist is the mentality of I will grow and progress if I fail. So I'm just going to run full speed. And this was one of the things where I was like, okay, I need to really read and digest this book. But they have a whole section on how they created the pig character. And what I found really interesting, I know this is probably really small for you guys to see, I'm sorry. But I highly recommend this book, by the way. But one of the things I found interesting is they use adjustment layers for their color and light. They don't paint on with like new layers of overlay. They actually just create an adjustment layer and then create their light that way. So that is a very interesting way of doing it. I'm going to experiment myself and see if I like that way of creating light and shadow in my pieces. But that was just one example of people that I really respect and admire with their use of color and light. And if you have artists that you really like, or even if it's like Loesch or one of the more popular artists, really look into how do they do their process. All right, sorry, I'm going on tangents. I can tend to ramble if I get excited over a subject. But Tonko House is the animation studio. You should definitely look them up. And they're on YouTube as well. So they have a few free tutorials you can check out on YouTube. And I'll put a link in the description after. All right, anyways. Let's go back to our duck color. Okay, so if this is our base color, this is our diffuse color if you're more involved with 3D art. And essentially, that is the color of the object. So if we're looking around, the color of this mug, even though it's reflective, is a blue. And I'd have to figure out what the hue, saturation, and value of the actual diffuse color is. So I'd have to put it in as neutral as lighting as humanly possible. And I would grab that color, and that would essentially be the diffuse color. And then as we start throwing in the shadows and the lights, that's when the color starts to either become more saturated, less saturated, or it becomes lighter or darker. There's a lot of things that can affect the diffuse color based on the lighting that it's in. So first, I'm going to show you guys what not to do. And honestly, it's not one of those things where you have to feel ashamed if you are doing this. This is something that, and I don't want to say it's like the absolutely do not. It's just a rule that I tend to follow, and it seems to really work. So I hope that this will help you guys with your own work if you feel like your colors and the way that you're treating lighting isn't really coming out the way that you want it. I'm going to put a neutral gray behind here so we can see the white here. And really quick, I should probably answer a few questions. I'm sorry if I get kind of sidetracked. Sometimes I do that and I just ramble on. But I promise that I have the comments right in front of me, so I'm going to keep looking at those as well. Okay, Christy says, would you say that the background color can affect the colors a person chooses? Oh, absolutely. Working on a white background is intimidating. It's one of the things that I was told halfway through my art college is we would be painting in Photoshop, and the teacher said, do never work on a white background. It's intimidating, and instead work on a neutral gray background because then for some reason it's more comforting. You feel like you have more freedom because that white sometimes is so demanding that it can be intimidating to put your first stroke down. So yes, if it was up to me, I would say, or if I would recommend to use a color background, I would say do a neutral color as much as possible. Neutral gray would probably be the number one suggestion. But if you're wanting to do like more of a warm scene, then instead of like a pure gray color, just make it a touch warmer. Something like that. And I will say though, all of the colors you choose on top of it may tend to look a bit more cooler because of that contrast, which who knows, maybe that's what you're going for. There's a lot of tricks that the color can do to the human mind when you're looking at it. Okay, so the way on how not to blend colors together. Oops. My Alt tool is being funny today. So the worst thing that you can do is just add white and black to a color for the transition. Something like that. Now, when it comes to realism, sometimes it looks like this is the right way to go, but I promise you that the more that you throw in some more colors, it almost immediately becomes more interesting. And even in life, it doesn't have just a spectrum of black to white. It really does have a vast mixture of colors that will be influenced by whatever light source that you have lighting your object. So instead, we're going to play off of the fact that I took a picture of Frederick in the sun. Actually, I have the picture here. And don't mind, I didn't even realize there was a dead bug attached to his head at first, so I took the picture with it on, and then I realized there's a dead bug on him, but I left it anyways. Anyways, here is an example of what I think you should do. So whenever you have that neutral base, and I'm going off of, actually, we could even work on the specific color. No, I'm gonna stick with this orange color. So instead of using white for my transition of what the color should look like in light, instead, I'm going to go to my color picker, which all you do is you go to the bottom of the tool menu, you click the swatch that you're working with, and I'm going to go a little lighter in the value. Remember, the value is up and down, and I'm going to make it slightly less saturated, because usually with sunlight or a very bright white light, or even a cool light, the color will actually get a bit washed out, and that's why your shadow colors tend to be more saturated. So I'm also going to do what is called hue shifting. So on the orange, I'm going to also bend it up toward yellow just a smidge. Choose OK. And that will be my color here. And then for areas where the light is really hitting it, I'm going to push it even further towards, closer to white, but I'm still staying pretty far away from it. Something like that. And then if you really wanted to have like a full spectrum, then I would get even closer and put it over here. But I try to avoid having such a high contrast with black and white. Instead, I like my contrast to be more with like saturation or hue, because I think that delivers a more powerful punch. So same thing with our shadows. Instead of using black, I'm going to go to my hue or my color picker. I'm going to make it slightly darker and more saturated. And I'm going to bend it slightly toward red, because I'm bending it toward the cool colors. And red's obviously not a cool color, but red turns into purple and blue. The purple and blue is the eventual color that we're trying to hit. And I'll do it one more time. Same thing, a little darker, a little more saturated, bend it down. All right, now if I crop these off, you can see how much more colorful and dynamic the second row is compared to the first. And if you're looking for more of a realistic look, it'll probably be somewhere in between these two. But I tend to work more fantastical just because I think it leaves the viewer with a more interesting result. And I like treating color in a way where I'm not restricting myself just to realism. Okay, question from Colonial Mumu 108 says, what book is that? That is called, let me make sure for sure. It's called The Art of the Dam Keeper, and I highly recommend it. Yes, it's Tigil says, why not fill the hot tub with mud instead of water and have rubber pigs instead of rubber ducks? Actually, we've thought of that, but one of my friends, Gawky, she's another artist, and she was on one of these streams a while ago. She bought more tub toys for the hot tub. So it looks like we're going to be getting some dolphins and seals and walruses sometime soon. And we'll have Frederick get some more friends. Okay. Arc Zero says, can you move the color box more to the left so we can see what colors you're picking? Yeah, let me make sure. I'll look on my screen here. There we go. Somewhere like there. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, this is a color. This is an example of hue shifting rather than value shifting. And in a perfect world, or I'm sorry, this is an example of saturation and value shifting, not just value shifting. So in a perfect world, you should be doing hue shifting, which affects saturation, value, and your hue. So those, or I'm sorry, it's color shifting. I'm jumbled up. Color shifting. So you're working on all three of those spectrums of hue, saturation, and brightness, and you're affecting all of them when you're affecting your colors. Okay, so I'm gonna hide that. Oops, did I really do all that on its own there? Oh, geez. Let me make a copy. Okay, so for the second example, let's choose that neutral yellow again. And mind you, I'm not trying to focus on is my sphere looking perfect, because when you're working with color experiments, obviously you should always have proportion and stuff in mind, but the true test and what you should be really focusing on is color and light. So I'm not really caring if this isn't a perfect sphere. So I'm going to be color picking from the duck, but you can see, let me lay down the colors on the side. You can see how color picking from the photo that we took, it actually reflects what I was just talking about. You can see how if this was our neutral base, our diffuse color, if we go slightly darker and more saturated, we get, on our color picker, you can see we get slightly darker and more saturated. And that's color picking right from a photo. And that's how I taught myself a lot with color, is taking photos of different areas where I could tell there was interesting light and color, especially with nature. Look at like the underside of a leaf, and you'll see that subsurface scattering and how that really affects the saturation of that green. Anyways, if we go back to our neutral color again, same thing with our lighter colors. It's based on my guess, it should go higher in value and less in saturation. And when I click on that yellow, you can see on our color picker that's true. And it should create this curve. Now, I try to create a mathematical, on how that curve actually is, or like what exactly is that curve, but I wasn't able to do it fully. But I can tell you it does have sort of that curve, and rarely will anything ever be this saturated all the way in that corner. It's more of like a digital color, not so much like a realistic color. So instead, you can see how that curve is something that we should be following instead. So I'm going to write that, or I'm going to recreate that on our sphere here. And I'm assuming that the light source is overhead and coming at it slightly in the front. So I'm going to lay it pretty thick in this central area. And then as it gets to that shadow area, I'm going to just let it have a slight fall off. Now, I don't want it to be complete sharp like this, because when it comes to a rounded object, if the sunlight is, or whatever light source is in front of it, it'll have more of a rounded gradient from the light to the shadow. So instead of having that very hard cut, like in the reference, you can see here how that shadow is very sharp, and that's called a cast shadow. There's a huge difference between a cast shadow and a rounded shadow. So a rounded shadow is when the form is round and the light source is falling off as it goes around the object. And then the cast shadow is when there literally is an object blocking your light source, and as it falls on whatever object you have, it creates a very harsh and sharp shadow line. And the duck is honestly perfect. So Frederick, you are perfect and wonderful in every way, because you have that fall off shadow on the very top of his head because it's round, but then the head casts a shadow on his body, but his body is also round, so then that turns into a rounded shadow. And we have that mix of a cast shadow right next to a rounded shadow. And the best part of all of this is that shadow color. So right there, I'm color picking right in the middle of that cast shadow, and the color right under his body are practically the same color. Now it's a little lighter because we're getting bounce light from the table. That's why it's a little lighter. But the whole idea of all this is shadows don't multiply on top of each other. So if two shadows meet, they're not going to get darker in that meeting area for the most part. That's if there's one light source. If there's multiple light sources, then it becomes a little different. But with one light source, singular, there is no multiplying of shadows. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons I learned a few years ago, and it has really helped me understand shadows and that they don't add upon each other. So I'm going to do the same thing with the sphere here. Now remember, this is a rounded shadow, or a rounded light, or a rounded object. So we're creating a fall off shadow, not a cast shadow. There's a huge difference. I'm just using basic brush strokes. I'm using the chalk brush, which looks like this. And you can download this at cgcookie.com. It's one of our free resources. It's honestly one of my favorite brushes to use. I use it for almost everything. So that's why I'm using it for the example today. Okay, let me really quick read the comments. Terminal Glow says, when you start with orange, bending the color toward red, and then purple is just as much bending it toward a cool color as bending it to yellow and then green. Doesn't that sort of defeat the purpose of saying bend it toward a cool color? Let me reread that again just to make sure I know what you're saying. And purple. So typically when you're bending, I use cool color very loosely. It's generally associated with blue, purple, and green. Yes, those are the cool colors, and then red, yellow, orange are the warm colors, or they're considered warm. So if I'm working with a green and I want to bend it cool, then I would go more toward blue. And then if I want to bend it warm, I go more toward yellow. I would say blue and yellow are like the polar opposites in terms of when people think of warm versus when people think of cool. And that's not to say that they're opposites on the color wheel, because in the modern color wheel, red and cyan are opposites, not blue and yellow. Well, actually, no, blue and yellow are, but usually people think of blue and what is the orange as being its complement, when really it's actually yellow. So those two are polar opposites. So any color that you choose, if you want to get more warm, bend it toward yellow. If you want to get more cool, bend it toward blue. James Rio says, Tim, do you include temperature in your HSV when considering color decision? I often just hear people reference HSV and not temperature. Do you find it not as important as other properties of light and color? No, I do find it important. Actually, I did a whole color course last year, and if you're interested, like if color really interests you and you want to learn more about it, one of the links below has a link to the color course that I did, and it's about a 20-part tutorial course. And I really go into everything that I learned about color, and one of them was temperature. And I do think temperature is important because not so much with the what I'm doing today with the demo, but I will say if you want an overall mood in your piece, temperature is very important. If you want a very frigid looking winter scene, having mostly cool colors and then like an isolated hint of like orange or red from like a candlelight from like a log cabin, that mood is really dependent on the temperature of the piece. And I feel like sometimes with color, people throw around a lot of definitions and words around, but when it comes down to it, I think temperature really affects the mood of your piece, whereas your HSV will affect the value, the contrast, the bounce lighting, like things that are more technical, I would say, whereas temperature is more, what's that word? It affects the way you see and you feel about the piece. So I do think it is important. I just feel like I always teach HSV because I really do believe, or I call it HSB, just because of how much I believe in understanding color to really allow yourself the freedom to work with color. All right, one more question. JSouth75 says, off topic, any suggestions on books or online classes on portrait drawing? Also, what's important to learn, such as value, line drawing, etc.? Everything that is fundamental is important to learn. And the fundamentals are basically value, lighting, color, some would say proportion, and like perspective. But I think when it comes down to it, if you can really understand value, form, color, and light, I think those four are like the pinnacle of your foundations. So any tutorial or anything that you can teach yourself to really strengthen those would help. And then in terms of online classes, I've taken a CGMA one and I've taken a Schoolism one. They were both good. I think it all depends on your personality type and how well you do working with an instructor and the way that they teach your class. I felt like I had a really good connection with my teachers, and that's why I feel like they really helped. But I think it's important to know, if you're going to sign up for an online class, you're going to be expected to do a lot of work. So if you don't have the time available, then I would not sign up for it. I would allow yourself a good 2-month chunk to really allow yourself the full time necessary to complete the homework assignments if you're taking a longer workshop. All right, back to the thing we're working on here. I'm going to also place underneath of him, I'm going to grab orange from the bill of the duck. I'm going to place it under him. So now when you introduce a new color like this, especially if we're having the sphere resting on this color is going to be affecting our subject matter, because when you're working with light, you also have to work with the way that light bounces. So in this example, light is going to hit, it's going to hit that orange, and whenever it hits a surface, it bounces around in like every direction. But usually it has a stronger direction in the bounce that it was hitting on. So it's going to bounce and then hit on the underside of this sphere. So on the underside of the sphere, I could even make a mask layer here. It would be more orange. Now, the one thing to know when you're working with bounce lighting is the bounce light will never be as strong as the original light source itself. So the orange that I place on the sphere will not be as strong as the orange on the floor that it's being bounced off of. And then the other thing is, when we introduce that object, we also need to be aware of, cancel. We also have to be aware of the shadow that it's casting. So in this case, it would be it would not be black, it would be a darker version of that orange color. Something like that. I'm gonna actually turn touch off. It's kind of messing with, my hand like keeps touching it and it keeps affecting settings that I don't want it to edit. So I'm gonna turn that off. And then the final thing that we would do is we would add a highlight. Now, sometimes I like to add a pre-highlight depending on what material I'm working with. So I usually throw down a bit of a lighter color, and then I blend it in. And it's like prepping for that highlight. And then I'm going to grab pure white, but I'm not going to use, actually, no, I'm going to grab that yellow that we were working with. And I'm going to bend it really close to white, but like I said, no black and white. That's the one rule I try to follow, and it really does seem to help my end results with the works that I do. Something like that. Now, the one thing that I also learned is usually when the light and the shadow meet, it becomes a bit more saturated on that edge. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to create an overlay layer. Grab that yellow. Or no, I'm going to grab that darker orange. That's too much. I gotta like do it softer. And then depending if our light source was very strong, like in a yellow, I could make this super vibrant like this, and then have some of that color kind of bleed off of the object, depending on how you want the end result to look. But I tend not to rely on overlay and multiply as much as I used to. So instead, I'm just going to do a light pass of this overlay, just to give it more of a feel of that light hitting this object. Something like that. And I may go in and like clean it up. Oops, the new layer. Just to give it more of that shape of the sphere that we're trying to create. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is the bounce lighting from the gray. If our surrounding environment is more of a neutral gray, I'm going to go ahead, select it. Oh, you know what? First, no, I'm going to have some of that darker red on the bottom of the sphere on this side. Like that. And then I'm going to pull the gray. Because I love having the environment be reflected on the actual sphere itself. Oh, and while I'm blending this, I don't know if any of you guys are big Final Fantasy fans, but I was pretty let down by the news that it's being delayed 2 more months. I'm kind of looking forward to that game, and that news kind of hit me off guard because I was so happy that it was coming out actually on my birthday weekend, and I set the weekend off to play that game. So I gotta wait 2 more months. Hopefully it's with good purpose though. Okay, so this is our sphere. And essentially, if I wanted to push it any further, I'd probably clean up the rendering. But I think you guys get the point, and we're gonna move on to painting Frederick. And normally, I would recommend painting it from life rather than having the photo reference. But I think just because of the time constraint that we have, I'm gonna use the photo and be color picking from it. But one of the painting teachers that I had told me that whenever you're drawing a realistic study, such as a bowl of fruit or something along those lines, try to choose your own colors without color picking directly from the source. And this is working digitally. Obviously, traditionally, you can't do it as easily, but when it comes digitally, it's better to color pick from your own palette that you create and then see how close you were to recognizing the colors on the objects that you're painting. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, put all of these layers in a folder. Move this out of the way. Then we're gonna go ahead and paint Frederick. Oh, you know what? While I am doing that, if you guys want to add in your votes again for the Pokemon demo, where should I put this duck? So yeah, if you guys have any other votes, I will tally them up now as I create the base for Frederick. And I guess I'll answer a few questions while we're doing this. SI333X says, is CG Cookie going to expand on the traditional course, such as teaching how to use new mediums? Hopefully. Yeah, that's the goal. So we started out with doing pencils and mechanical pencils, and we're hoping to do more than just that. Arc Zero says, is there no bounce light on the right side of the shadow? There was. It was super subtle, though. If that was one thing I probably could have amped up more, it was the bounce light in the shadow. Because that's definitely a common misconception, is that there aren't bounce lights in shadow areas. But if we look at our duck photo here, let's see if we can find a good... Yeah, actually, this area would be considered... this area would be considered our shadow. And as you can see, it's lighter yellow down here than it is here or even here. And that's directly influenced by the bounce light that's happening on the table. So even though our light source is coming from behind the duck, there's still bounce light being bounced back toward the duck, because the way that a light hits an object, it bounces in every direction. It's not just a singular arrow light. So that's why you see the bounce light underneath of the duck. And then this was another challenging thing that I didn't even believe. I was like so passionate that this artist was wrong. And it's a color artist that I really respect. And she's been on the stream a few times. Her name is Mel Herring. And she used to go by the name Purple Kecleon, but now it's Glitch Puppet. And she did a tutorial on how the area where the light and the shadow meet is actually the darkest. And I remember thinking, no, that's not right, because when the light source hits an object, it gradients around, and the darkest part would be more on the bottom. And it was really interesting because then I started to test this theory because I feel like a little art scientist, and she was right. And it's not in the way that you may think. It's all because of bounce lighting. So even on this duck here, you can see how the lightest value is here, the darkest value is here, and then because of that bounce light, it is actually lighter. If I actually separate these two, let's pull them aside actually. You can see how it's very subtle. I don't know how well you guys will be able to see on the color picker, but you see that jump? And that's because that bounce light is actually making it slightly lighter underneath of the duck. And that's all because of bounce lighting. Okay, I'm going to get Frederick out of the way here. Let's see here. It looks like most of you guys voted, but I'm going to take on some of these new ones here. Ponyta. Man, you guys want to see Ponyta. Golem and Gengar. Oh, we got another Ponyta. Okay. And then we got another Agumon. Okay, so if you guys want to keep voting while I start the duck, I'll definitely make sure to keep looking up and down and getting all of those. John Miller says, does subsurface scattering of Frederick's material affect it any? Yes. So, I forgot to show you guys, I took photos. I did a photo shoot with Frederick, private of course. And you can see how, and if you guys don't know what subsurface scattering is, essentially it's when a light source hits an object, such as Frederick, and the light bounces inside of the actual object, and you can see the way that the light bounces through it, and it actually makes the object's color more saturated. The best example that we have is when, on just ourselves, is when you hold your hand up to a flashlight, and you can see through your fingers how it becomes very saturated and pink looking, and that's because the light is passing through our skin, and it's exposing all of those blood vessels that we have, and that red is becoming illuminated, and that's why it looks so saturated and bright. So that is what subsurface scattering is. And with Frederick, the duck, you can see how near his neck, right here, that's subsurface scattering, because the light source is coming through the window into Frederick's body, and it passes through, and it's actually bouncing on its neck. And since it's so thin there, that's why you see it so strong. Where like when you hold the flashlight up to your hand, you can't really see the light passing through the hand part, but when you do it through your fingers, that's when you can really see it because it's thinner. So the thinner the material is, or the more opaque it is, the easier it is for the light to travel through. So with direct sunlight, you can definitely see the difference on the way that the color is affected when you're working with a direct sun influence versus an indirect, which in this case, it's bounce lighting that's giving all of Frederick his color right now. And the other thing that I thought was very important for you guys to see is that even in the shadow, the beak is reflecting the light coming from the window. So sometimes we think that there will be no light, and even I've mistakenly said that you can't get highlights in shadows. And it's kind of true, but a true highlight is from the light source directly. So that's why this would not be considered a highlight on the beak. Instead, it's passing through the window and it's landing on the beak mainly because the beak's so reflective that it's reflecting the window, but it's not reflecting the sun directly. Because if it was reflecting the sun directly, that would be a true highlight. Now, if I'm going really fast, I'm trying to get as much information out there for you guys to hopefully latch onto. And I think there's so much to learn with color and light, so that's why I just kind of ramble when I talk about it. So the main thing that I really wanted to focus on when we get into the actual duck drawing is the way that the light falls on the object and how that really affects the color of the duck. You can see how in our indirect lighting reference, it's very neutral looking. There isn't a high contrast between the areas that are more lit and the areas that are more in shadow. So if we look at our color picker, you can see how the difference isn't a whole lot. But then if we go to our direct sunlight areas, you can see how we have it's all the way up actually on our value scale versus a shadow, how it's actually all the way on the saturation side, which we're definitely not getting on the shadow in the indirect lighting duck. Where here it's all the way up, actually almost entirely, except for the transition. You can see that transition right there. It's that curve that I was talking about. See how that works? Something like that. Now the third one was more or less just to show that this is a rounded shadow, this is a cast shadow. But I came to find out that the original photo that I took actually does a good job of showing a cast shadow next to a rounded shadow. Terminal Glow says, I was the first one to vote Ponyta. I wasn't trying to vote again. You know what? I appreciate your honesty. Thank you. And Mezzogenio says, voting for Snorlax. Ding. Okay, so when working on our duck here, I'm going to quickly do a rough sketch of our duck. I want to thank Frederick for being such a good sport today. Now, like I said earlier, when it comes to color test, I'm not really looking to make sure that my proportions are 100% accurate. I think it's more important to have the goal be, are my color theories being tested? Am I challenging myself and trying to understand color better? He has a happy little bill mouth. And the other thing that I try to do when I'm doing these initial sketches is working fast. I have a bad habit of going slower than I should be. And as a concept artist, especially in the industry, you have to work on your speed and really getting yourself at a point where you can pump out work pretty fast. All right, so I think, let me double check, and I'm going to flip it. I think I made his booty a little bigger than it actually is. All right, so that's going to be my base. Let's go ahead and start coloring them. So I'm making a new layer. I'm putting it underneath of that line art layer just so I can see the general shape that I'm trying to create. And when I'm really working fast, like when I did the demo duck for the poster for this live stream, I did it really, really fast. And I think when I'm trying to break it down for you guys, I want to work just a touch slower so that it's not just lost in translation. So now, usually when I'm working on a subject matter like this, actually, I'm just going to fill the entire thing in. I like to have a base color to kind of represent my diffuse color of whatever object I'm working on. And you know what? That was actually a bit lighter than what I wanted. Probably something like this, because I like working from dark to light. So this is our diffuse color of the duck. If there's any area where I'm laying down color and that base color kind of peeks through, that's okay. I actually like having a base color that can represent the object. And if in anywhere, even in the eye or the beak, if that color shows through, it's okay because it's in harmony with the rest of the duck because it's all using that same base color. So then from here, let's go ahead and start painting on our light here. Now the other thing that I'm going to do that I have to constantly remind myself to do nowadays is like squint while you're painting. You really want to get the values and the colors without focusing on the details. So if you see me doing weird faces, it's not because I'm disgusted at what I'm working on. It's because I'm really trying to see the colors that are in the duck without focusing on the details of the duck. Of Frederick, I should be calling him by his name. And now in the shadow area, I'm going to be color picking, but you'll notice how the shadow colors are actually different in certain areas. And the coolest one is the area right under his beak is actually a bit more red. And that's because of the bounce light. It's bouncing on the wood, bouncing on his beak, and then bouncing back down to his belly. And that's why it appears a bit more orangish rather than being more of a yellow. So we're going to have that soft gradient going up the side of him. And as we get into the tail feather, I'm going to first lay on that lighter pass, and then we're going to go in and lay down the shadow. And look how different that shadow color is than his belly color. And that's because the bounce light is bouncing on the back of Frederick's head and then bouncing back onto the tail feather. Gray O Love says, so are you shaking in fear at the stark white looking background? Yes, that's why I had to lay down a base color first. SI333X says, how does flipping the image help you? This is more of a proportion thing than anything. Usually you can see if something looks off because sometimes when you're looking at something in the same perspective, you miss some of the subtleties that might need to be moved around. And that's why you see artists constantly flip their image so that they can get a better picture of what might be slightly off in proportion. Okay, then he has a little wing down here. Then you can see as the curvature of the duck gets further away from being like a direct point of access for the sun to hit, it becomes slightly more saturated, but it doesn't become a complete shadow until we get like underneath of the wing. I think I actually may do the body and the head on a different layer. Making a new layer. Let's go ahead and do the head. So the first thing I notice is we can make, actually it's much darker on the other side of the head. You can definitely see the contrast that's going to go from the head onto the body. And that's why this is a point of interest for the viewer. And the other thing that you should see is the top of the head color and the body color are going to be the same. There's no difference between the top of the head lightness, between the top of the body lightness. Like I said, I'm trying not to focus on the values too much, or on the details. I'm trying to focus on the values. That's what I should have said. Because remember, we're trying to do a rounded shadow on the head, unlike the cast shadow that's on the side of, or on this part of the body. Now he also has a little sliver of the other wing poking out on the other side. I'm going to make sure I include that. And it really gives more emphasis on the fact that the head is casting a straight shadow forward, and you can actually see the other side of the duck. All right, so now for his bill, I'm going to start with this darker color. And this is more of a personal preference to paint on the light from a darker value. I don't know why. I just might find it more comforting to work darker to light, but I've seen other artists work light to dark even, and it works just as well for them. So don't feel like this is the process you have to follow. It's just one that I feel most comfortable with. I'm going to grab that value on top of the beak. And then there's actually, if you can see in the reference of the duck, he has like a sliver of yellow right there. So the sun was just able to hit the slope of where the head and the beak meet. Now, the other thing that's really cool is inside of the actual mouth of Frederick, the light is bouncing so much through the head, and it bounces on the how thin it is on the other side of his mouth, that it actually appears more almost red-ish looking. So if I color pick and throw it down, oops, let me make sure I'm on the right layer. You can see how more vibrant that looks. Something like that. Okay, now I think I'm going to start throwing down our wood value, because I might start playing with some bounce lighting here. Then I'm erasing all of the black and this tan color where the duck is, because I want that initial color that we laid down to bleed through. Okay. So now from here, let me double check my values. Okay. So yeah, on the inside of our beak, oh, and I'm going to turn off that line art layer. We're at the point where we don't need the line art anymore. And I always talk about how your line art should act as like a guide, but then you should get to a point in your piece where you don't need it anymore. The values read very strong, where the line art almost becomes more of a distraction. So I'm going to take it out, and I'm going to work on, he has some bounce lighting passing back up on his beak. And it's a pretty strong bounce light, actually. And it's because that beak is so reflective. That's why the reflectiveness on the underside of his beak is more so than the underside of his belly, because that light is bouncing and hitting more of a reflective surface rather than one that's more matte. Then he has some of that orange bouncing back onto his belly from that beak. And the curve of the shadow that I place here really will alter the way that the duck is viewed in its form. So I want to make sure that that curve feels right. Then I guess we could do a little bit of smoothing here now that our values are in place. You can see how I didn't even add on the eyes yet because it's such a detail-oriented section that I don't want to even focus on it. Now that we're getting more into, I would say, a final pass of the duck, of Frederick, I can go in and add those eyes. Oh, you know what? I'm going to do the eyes on a new layer. As an example to show like if my proportions are slightly off, sometimes I tend to make eyes more wide set than they need to be. Since it's on its own layer, I can go ahead and just adjust it. Flip it. Or we could even like lasso it and turn it slightly. Like that. Now he has like one of those fake reflections in his eye. So I'm going to draw that in. And there's one thing missing about the duck. I want you guys to tell me if you can spot what I need to do to kind of call this duck done. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to see if there's any questions here. Enema Wizard says, if the color of the light is blue, would the yellow duck become greenish? Yes. So if there was a blue light, it would mix with the yellow duck and it would become more green. James Frio says, is Frederick our new god? Is this a tribute? I'm not sure if he's a god. I would say I would praise him, but that would be quackers. Sorry, my dad humor comes out from time to time. He's still like dripping water from the hot tub. I was like, what just dripped on me? Terminal Glow says, what made you choose the name Frederick? It's perfect. I'm just curious. I tend to name things on the spot. So I bought him, I threw him in the tub, and then someone asked me what his name was, and for whatever reason, Frederick. That was the name that came to mind. Just like the hot tub, his name is Harold Tubman. Grayo Love says, what if we made the eyes a dark blue instead of black? It's actually, I don't know if you can see it, it's more of a dark gray. So if I choose my color picker, a dark brown. So you can see here, it's not actually pure black. And you can see like, even though it looks to be pure black, it's not. And that's the whole idea of you can trick the viewer into thinking it's pure white or pure black, but you're not using pure white or pure black. Yes, it's Sigil says, I just got back from giving blood, and I was very tempted to take pictures of the blood as reference, but people looked at me weirdly, so I chickened out. Tigil, no! It's okay to be weird. I'm the weirdest person I know. Next time, take pictures. Spyro1223 says, highlights on the beak and the cast shadow. Yes, from Miss Chibi Artist. You two are the first ones to get it. So I'm going to quickly add in those two elements, and then we'll move on to whatever Pokemon we vote on. And you can see as I lay on these highlights, it like instantly gives the material a whole new material, really, the whole new look, and gives more information to the viewer on what is this material made out of. So before the highlight, it could have been the same material that the duck was made of. But now that we have a highlight on it, all of a sudden the viewer can look at it and be thinking, oh, okay, so it's not the same material that the duck is made out of. Otherwise, there would be a highlight on the top of the duck, on the tail fin, and maybe even on the body or top of the his wing. So instead, now the viewer knows this bill material is slightly different than the body material. And that's very important. And whenever you can add in these little tips and nuances to your materials to let it read better, do it. You want to really give as much information to your viewer as possible while staying true to whatever the material is. And now the cast shadow, this one is really interesting, and I'll talk about why it is in a second. There we go. So I know it might be kind of hard to see, but the cast shadow under him, directly under him, is more brown. The cast shadow that is not directly over him or under him is more purple. It's more blue. And I'm sure a few of you can already guess it, but I'll be really impressed if you guys can say in the comments why that is before I start explaining it. And let's see here. Grail Love says, you need to save your document and back up the file twice. Yes, that's very important, but I'm reading all of these jokes now. James Rio says, Tim, what did the duck say to the bartender when his tab was due? Put it on my bill. I've heard that one once or twice. Tigel says, is there some chemistry between Frederick and Cal? I feel a romance coming up. Who knows? Maybe. Yeah, maybe Cal will have a new friend to play with. Hold on. A few of you guys are telling me it's buffering. Let me double check. Frederick broke Twitch. Okay, hopefully that helped. If not, let me know. If anything, try refreshing. Sometimes that, at least for me, that's usually the problem. Okay. I'm going to keep going. If it keeps buffering, I'm sorry. But I want to make sure that we can get this done in time. So the area under the duck is actually more brown because the duck is casting its own light. It's the bounce light from the duck. The yellow from the duck is bouncing down and passing onto the wood, and that's what's making it more brown. And then the area that's not directly under the duck, it's actually being more purple or more blue from the sky because I took this photo outside. So, it looks like a few of you guys are actually getting it right. Hideous _ says, I was away for a long time, and can I ask if your traditional course is already finished and released? It is. You can actually watch the entire course on CG Cookie right now. So yes, James Frio, that is exactly it. It's all about the area around the object and how it's being influenced by the light source. So in this case, we're going to work with more of a brown shadow under the duck. And then on the other side, it's more blue. And they'll meet each other, and there's going to be like a slight gradient right there. Now, if you wanted to keep going and start detailing, you definitely can. But in this case, I'm going to go forward and move forth with, it looks like Psyduck is going to be our winner. Okay. I'm going to put all of these layers in the folder here. So Frederick is going to get his own folder. So thank you again, Frederick, for being our subject matter for today. And I'm sure we'll see him on a future stream because I honestly think he's like a perfect example to work with. And I'll put him in different lighting scenarios and just test color and light. And I'm sorry for everyone where it doesn't seem to be working for you guys. I keep seeing you guys, a few of you it's working, a few of you it's not. Okay, so I'm going to turn Frederick off here. And it looks like Psyduck is our winner. So let me go ahead and find a Psyduck reference. I mean, I kind of have a good idea. I'm pretty sure he has like 3 black prongs on the top. He has a giant orange or kind of light colored platypus bill. And yeah, yep, I found him. All right, let's see here. So this is one of the references I'll be working with. Oh, here's a good reference. Let's see here. I'm going to try to find one more. Okay. So I'm going to be working with Psyduck today. Let's go ahead and do it. Now, the other thing that I'm going to be focusing on while I'm working on Psyduck is light and color, because the whole demonstration today is on color and light. So you know what? Actually, first I'm going to do a quick let me know if the stream comes back to you guys. Hopefully, it's something related to Twitch instead of my internet, because I'll be very upset if that's the reason. I feel like I really like Psyduck, and if you guys play Pokemon Go, I really like the way he looks in Go. He's just very derpy looking. He's kind of like staring at you. So I think that's the way I want to represent him here. All right, sounds like the stream is back. Okay. Whew. Thought you guys were going to miss Psyduck. And he is very simple with his forms. It's basically a sphere on top of a oval egg shape. Okay. So now that we have this gorgeous line art to work with, why don't we go ahead and start coloring them? I see Psyduck as definitely more yellow. Oh, you know what though? I'm going to choose one of the original Frederick colors to work with. Actually, I might even make it more mirrored. Yeah, something like that. I mean, I think Psyduck is so funny. All right, so instead of just directly picking from the reference that we have with Psyduck, I'm going to go ahead and uh, show again the way that I pick my colors, and then hopefully you guys can get into a habit of picking your own colors as well. And we'll have the light source coming from overhead and to the left. We'll do a very basic light source so that we can show the cast shadow falling from the beak, and then same with his body. And then our wonderful digital correspondent is telling me that it seems like there's been a few troubles with other Twitch users on Twitch today, so hopefully it's not just happening with our channel. I'm going to get the top of his shoulder on his belly, and then there's going to be a cast shadow from the beak somewhere around here. Then his head will be casting a shadow on his arm as well. So you may only get to see like that much of it. Something like that. And then we'll get a more rounded shadow on the bottom underneath of him. For his eyes, I'm actually going to color pick the light gray from the reference on that one. So now here's an interesting spot where you can see the light source passing on the second eye, and right now it's way too light. It's matching the same lightness as the first eye, which doesn't make sense if the light source is predominantly from that side. So instead, that eye is going to be more in shadow. And his bill, lighter color. And actually, I'm going to use purple as the base just to add a nice complement to the yellow that we're using. And the area in light is going to be this lighter tannish color. And then on the top of his hair, or on top of his head, he's got these 3 little spokes of hair that he combs every morning. He's looking very dapper. Something like that. John Miller says, haven't lost stream yet. DJ Hud says it's back. Been intermittently cutting off on a few different streams today. Okay, so it sounds like there's been a few reports of not just our stream cutting off. So, oof. A few of you guys are wondering what Diglett looks underground, and that's a mystery. Gray Zero Love says, do you have any advice for taking your own reference photos? I think my greatest piece of advice, if you're going to take it in nature, try to give yourself the best composition in terms of the lighting scheme that you're working with. I like to work on overcast days if I'm not specifically trying to create a scene with like sun hitting it. I think just because it shows the form more properly rather than being distracted by the light. But if you want to take pictures of like anatomy, I highly recommend that everyone right now just take pictures of yourself and don't feel embarrassed by it. Every artist that I've talked to has done it, and it's something that once you get over the fear of taking photos of yourself and not being embarrassed, then it's like you have a walking anatomy reference with you at all times. So if you ever need anatomy reference, you can always just take a picture of yourself. All right, I'm going to get, let's see. we're going to put him in. I almost want to be like looking down. Ooh, my bad. When I'm looking down at him, like as if we just kind of came across him randomly while we were out. So I'm going to put grass underneath of him is what I'm trying to say here. James Frio says, Tim, speaking of hair, we were saying earlier that your hair is on point today. It literally does come to, there's like a point. Is this the way my hair goes? Or is it this way? This way. Yeah, like literally, I looked in the mirror, I was like, it literally came to a point. McKinney says, Tim, we live in a world of selfies. I don't think many of us are worried about taking pictures of ourselves for reference. Very true. And you know what? Some people are not the biggest fan of Psyduck, but I love Psyduck. And the reason I say that is sometimes when we're out playing Pokemon Go, people will like be disappointed in seeing a Psyduck. They're like, Psyduck. I'm like, hell yeah, I'll take a Psyduck. No, we'll keep it more like that. Okay, so now I'm going to do a cleanup, and then we'll start detailing it. I have like, I have 30 minutes? Okay, we'll definitely make a nice looking Psyduck in the 30 minutes we have. So you can see, even without the line art, you can tell the forms of the body because of the way that we placed on our values and the way that we placed on our lighting. So we don't even need the line art anymore to separate our forms because the value pass did it for us. So now I just get to have fun with you guys for the next half hour while I paint on the rest of Psyduck here. And I really wanted him to be like looking up at us. Like, are you going to catch me or not? I'm just going to sit here until you catch me. I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to argue. I'll just wait. And I'm noticing he actually does have sort of a bump on the beak. So I'm going to represent that with value too. Nugo guy says, your Magikarp turned into Gyarados yet? Oh, actually, let me grab my phone really quick. So I was told by one of my friends that I should level up my Magikarp before I evolve him. So it's not a Gyarados yet, but let me show you guys something. Alright, can you guys see that? So there's my Magikarp, my beautiful little flopper. He's at 194. and I finally have enough candy. So I'm going to wait until I go out next time with my friends and play so I can throw down my lucky egg, and then I'm evolving him. It's kind of a big moment in my life, apparently. So I'm pretty excited about that. And you know what? There'd be a cast shadow from these little hair plucks that he has up here. And then if you guys missed last week, I'm going to do the same thing in where I adjust the colors and have fun with it near the end. Because it's something that I almost do on every piece I do. And I just really think it really helps the image overall. So hopefully you guys can start experimenting with that too. See if you like the way it looks on your pieces. James Frio says, Tim, in all seriousness, how the hell did you catch that many Magikarp? I can't find more than one or two at a time. I live really close to a river in Waukesha, Wisconsin. And if you guys know that water Pokemon generally spawn more closer toward water. So there's been a lot of Magikarp near this lake or the river. But I will say there still is a lot of Pidgey, a lot of Weedle, and more than anything, there's a lot of Drowsy. But you know what? I have no problem catching any of those because, one, if you catch 3 Pidgey, 3 Weedle, or 3 Caterpie, you automatically get 1,000 experience for evolving it, if you use the Lucky Egg, of course. And then with Drowsy, I think he looks like a pig, and since I love pigs, I don't mind catching him. But he does look a little creepy. I called him the Golden Tickler because he just looks a little creepy, but I think he looks cute too. So I don't mind catching a lot of Drowsy. So I'll take all the Drowsy. If you guys don't want your Drowsies, just send them over to me. His arms are actually lower than I think I gave it credit for at first. You know what? The way that I drew this, actually, the whole right side of his body would actually be in shadow. Light wouldn't be able to hit it. All right, let's throw in some of our bounce lighting here. Because he is a duck, so I assume he would be kind of shiny. Not crazy shiny like a fish, but just a little shiny. We're going to say it's a nice sunny day, so some of the area in shadow is going to get that blue treatment. James Frio says, you can have all my Drowsy. I have half my inbox filled with Drowsy and Hypnos. Yeah. I remember the first time I found Drowsy, I was like really excited. And ever since then, it's died down a little bit just because I think I'd be less frustrated or I think people in general would be less frustrated with Drowsy if it didn't take 50 to evolve them. Because like Pidgey, yeah, it's kind of like they're everywhere, but they're good for leveling up. So I think that's why people are okay with Pidgey. But then when it comes to Hypno, it's just like you cost a lot to evolve. You're not that good in battle. And you kind of have this creepy smile going on that I don't know if I can trust you or not. So I think I overuse blue in my shadows, but I really like the look of it. It's almost like over emphasizing a shadow area. So I tried my best not to make it so blue that I kind of lose the actual shadow itself. So I try not to go overboard. But I do like to have at least a hint of blue in the shadow area. And then his feet are a good example of where I can just use my selection tool. Just green them out, get that nice shape. But since I like having a bit of texture everywhere, I'm going to go ahead and add some texture on the feet after. Okay. So now I'm not really digging the background color choices that I chose. So let's go ahead and I'm going to crop this down here. Let's see if we can play with this color to make it better. Right now, I don't know why I'm not digging the dark green. Oh, I know what's probably bothering me. I don't have the light kind of staying true to the cast shadows that we have on his body. I wonder, I feel like I should make this funnier because it is Psyduck. Like a part of me just wants to put him in like a paper bag. Like you were out buying groceries. Here's an apple. And somehow he like snuck in the bag and now you're stuck with Psyduck. It's like a box of cereal behind him. I'm going to play with the colors a bit. Maybe we should have I think that's what's throwing me off right now. Oh, I have an idea. Okay, hold on. All right, run with me for a little bit, guys. Let's see if I can make this work. I think you'll get what I'm going for pretty quickly. I'll see which one of you guys can guess first what you think is going on. Yeah, he's floating on his back in water. Like I'm imagining there's like a river and he's just like slowly turning in a river, just unaware that he is actually awake right now. It's gonna make it darker so that there's more depth to this water. What are you guys asking? Oh, for a tiny Frederick on top? Yeah, I can do that. Let me quickly add in my light here. He's just lounging, just enjoying his day. Oh yeah, then we'll have like a Magikarp swimming underneath. Pretty sure he has a pink mouth. Like trying to remember from my last week's stream. What does Magikarp look like? Oh, that's right. Then he has those two giant fins on either side. And to make it look more in the water, I'll just erase some of him. Like that. I feel like he's actually too far underwater. Hold on. Yeah, I'm going to have the tips of his feet sticking out. I feel like those would actually be pushed forward. Yeah, something like that. Yes, its digital says you should add a tiny Frederick floating there as well, like a top view. That is a great idea. Quick values on Frederick. And he had a little highlight on his beak. Christine McAvee says, shouldn't the beak be more vertical? You know what? Probably, actually, yeah. So let's see if we can do a quick tilt job here. All right, now let's adjust the colors and see what we get. Actually, first I'm going to adjust the vibrance. perfect. And I think other thing that may help. No, I kind of like it vertical better. Or this way better, I mean. Obviously, I think this piece went in a different direction than what I initially thought. But I had fun with it nonetheless. And when you're playing with color and light, try to have fun with it. Because the more that you have fun with it, the more you'll feel comfortable experimenting with it. Otherwise, it just becomes a pain. And sometimes learning something as frustrating as color and light can be a bit painful. So to make it as painless as possible, I would say this would be a good way of like, do a fan art piece or do something that you know you'd have actually a lot of fun drawing. And then you'll, while you're working, you'll be picking up and learning things without even really realizing it. I'm going to turn my touch back on. Oh no, that actually makes him look like he's dead. I feel like someone killed him and threw him in the water. Or it's like this is one of those things where anytime anyone says something bad about you and you can overhear them, you're just like, Or every time you throw a Pokeball and the Pokemon jumps over you, you're just like, That's what I feel like that looks like right now. I tried to have it like a enjoyable Sunday nap afternoon face, but that was not what that turned out to be. Yeah, that just looks miserable. Now I kind of like the fact that he's just kind of floating and there is no real story behind him. Just kind of he's just there for no real reason. Okay. Um I think we're getting close to the end. Yeah, we are. Okay. I'm going to give it I think a few more polishing areas, but if you guys have any last minute questions on kind of what we reviewed today, I know the last 20 minutes got a bit ridiculous there, but I had fun today regardless. And I hope you guys learned something new about color. Oh, and if you guys have any other, we actually have a thread, and I'm going to check that again just to double check if there's any good ones on there that I think are more like a fundamental. But if you guys want to learn something specific and you want me to do it for one of these live streams, let me know. And there, we actually do have a forum post just on future topics. And I think if there's one that's more on like the fundamental side, because I feel like these are the ones that are just not only fun for me to do, but I feel like actually help hopefully teach you guys something new that maybe you didn't know before. And I think that's why I want to keep continue doing those, because I think that's why I started doing live streams way back when, and I want to keep that tradition going. I feel like the way that I added in that blue was a bit much. May make it a slightly more yellow. Like that. Um, James Trio says, Tim, do you ever use the fade brush tool in Photoshop? Command F on a Mac after you paint up or after you make a paint stroke? Uh, no. I find myself when I'm blending, I work with the blender brush, which is the mixer tool brush, and that's usually what I use to blend my areas together. But no, I've never used, because my F right now is set to full screen. So that's what happens. The terminal glow says, I'm still just trying to get anatomy down. And for a second there, I was like, I think you can get Psyduck's anatomy down pretty easily. He's basically just a squash or like a pear. Actually, That is what he is. He even has a little thing on the top. I just noticed that Psyduck is actually just a pear disguising itself as a Pokemon. I mean, thank you guys for letting me have fun with today's stream. This is the result of when my mind has no filters and I just kind of go for it. Because oftentimes I'm drawing like serious pencil drawings and things that aren't as kooky or silly, and I think that's why I took the opportunity today to go with it. All right, I think we're going to end it up here though. Seems like the leg is back, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. I want to thank you guys for coming to this live stream. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. And there's a contest going on right now. That's why I drew Psyduck in the first place. But also I'm holding a mini contest. If any of you guys are interested, I hold every 1,000 followers I got on Instagram, I give away a pencil drawing. And right now, this one you can go ahead and claim for yourself. It's one of my characters, Chase, and I drew him in like a punk style, or as punk as I can make something. So if you want a chance to win that, all you have to do is go to @vonart on Instagram, and you can go ahead and win that. So thank you guys again for coming. I will definitely look at the suggestions for next week. I'll probably do another fundamental one. I've been having a lot of fun with these, and it seems like you guys enjoy them as well. And thank you also for letting me ramble for 2 hours. All right. So hopefully we'll see you guys next week. And until then, take care. Bye, everyone. Sign.